In November 2001, the Attorney General of Missouri requested that Joe Amrine be executed by the taxpayers of Missouri for a 1985 prison murder despite no witnesses or evidence. A graduate instructor and two former students of the University of Missouri heard of the injustice of Joe's case. With borrowed equipment, a home computer, and 6 weeks of production, they scrambled to craft this documentary.
Joseph Imrine was in the Missouri State Penitentiary on death row for killing Gary Barber, and then I testified. I was forced to testify. I felt, and I was told all my testimony was lies, and I was scared he was gonna die because I lied on him.
We have our flaws in the Missouri system, as do all states.
It was false. There wasn't no truth to it because I wasn't there. I didn't see it.
Because I didn't see anything else.
Now, you ended up testifying for the state at Joe Amrine's trial.
Yes.
That you saw Joe Amrine stab Gary Barber in the back. Do you recall that?
Yes.
Was that testimony true?
No, it wasn't.
Out of the prison, protect me. I would change my story.
That we're dangerously close to having a human being who's innocent.
Was that a lie?
Yes.
Being executed for this crime.
Which is real significant because Kevin Dean Bay would have told the jury, I saw Terry Russell stab Gary Barber.
Executed. I really believe that we killed an innocent.
People that don't understand that this is a total different world here.
Joe Amrine has come dangerously close to losing his life.
They believe what they see on TV.
And you and other officials will have your hands bloodied by killing an innocent man.
Joe could really be anybody.
The Potosi Correctional Center is just outside of the town of Potosi, which is the county seat of Washington County, and they've created a town called Mineral Point to house or to be the site for the prison.
You're sitting in a situation where there's nothing you can do. You're dependent on somebody else. And here you are dependent on the same type of person that you were dependent on initially, a lawyer that get pays from the state, So where do you go from there, what I mean? It don't look good. It don't look good no matter how you look at it. And the best thing you can do is to say to yourself that, maybe anything gonna happen. If it don't nothing happen, I'm just gonna try to do what I can, live like I can, and do what I can until that time comes, and that's all you can do.
Well, first of all, Joe has never committed a capital offense. He's never committed a crime where anybody was harmed. He was 20 years old when he went to prison. When a person gets close to execution, they increase his security level in the prison. So he's in administrative segregation. He is in a cell all by himself and is not allowed out of the cell. His trays are slid under the door. That's how he takes his meals. Really, his whole life is in that cell. He's not allowed out for exercise. He's pretty much locked down 24 hours a day.
Oh man, you know what? There's a guy here right now, they call him Old Man Preacher. And he sings songs. He has a whole lot of some Christian songs he has. But he got one in particular song and it said, it goes, all my friends are dead. And that, I believe that's a true statement right there. All my really true friends, they all dead. They're all dead.
He's very pessimistic about his appeals. We try to be optimistic with him and say, Joe, you know, we're working hard. But he's very frightened, very alone right now.
You look at what happens in our courtrooms across the country in Missouri, you know, where we sentence a human being to death, and then we tell them, you're going to die one day. We wait 12, 8, 15, 20 years, and then we finally kill them. We inject them with poison. You know, those people are living nightmares for years and years, and as are their family members.
If you don't accept the fact that you're probably going to end up being executed, then you're probably going to lose your mind. For real, you're probably going to lose your mind.
He's trying to hold on to hope. There's no doubt about that. He's struggling, and thankfully, he's got a legal team that's very supportive of him, and so he's gathering or continues to get some support from that, from Sean O'Brien and others. But yeah, I think he feels tempted to give in a lot of times, and I could see why.
We put people in prison for various lengths of time to punish them, but when they pay their debt to society, we give them a chance to come out and be law-abiding citizens. Joe has never had that chance. He has been incarcerated since he was 20 years old, and he is well beyond the age where he represents any kind of danger to society. I think Joe is ready to come out.
If you let the government or the state or whatever kill an innocent man, well, then that kind of means the government's getting kind of out of control. If the day they kill an innocent man, the more they might come in your house without a search warrant, or they might be, or you might find yourself, or somebody in your family find themselves in a courtroom with a Tom Brown and a Julian Hobson. The biggest problem is here that most people who words have any type of say-so what goes on here, they feel that these situations would not confront them. These situations would not affect them in their life.
The execution of innocent human being is really haunting to a society, as well it ought to be, because it just calls attention to the fact that it could be any one of us, really. If we happen to get, misidentified, or somebody in a position of power has an axe to grind with us, there for fortune go you or I, as the folk song goes.
Once you realize, one night you lay in bed, you realize that, damn, I might be getting executed. And then first thing you're gonna do, reflect back on your past. And you're gonna see it ain't gonna look too good. And then somehow you might want to decide, well, I'm gonna try to better myself. In the event that I do get executed, at least I don't want everybody saying that they glad I'm dead. Or at least I want one person who might share a tear for my death, And at one time, that's the way I felt, like, if I get executed today, is there gonna be anybody who's gonna feel it? I don't know. I don't know.
On October 10th, 1985, Terry Russell and Gary Barber got in a fight, and they were locked down in solitary confinement. They were each sentenced to 10 days in the hole, and were released from the hole on October the 18th, 1985, at about 10 in the morning. 4 hours later, they first came into contact with one another in the multi-purpose room. It's the recreation room in Housing Unit 5 of the penitentiary. That was their first contact with one another since the fight they'd been in a week before.
They let us out for red. We came down in the activity room, and Joe was over there about to finna play some poker. And Fox, he was sitting there watching TV. And I was in the back lifting some weights.
Officer John Noble, who was a seasoned correctional officer, was assigned to watch the inmates in the room that day.
And everything seemed normal, so after a while, I was getting a headache, and I left. I told the guard, let me go get some aspirins.
And he heard a commotion in the center of the room, and he turned and saw Terry Russell running away from Gary Barber. Gary Barber pulled a knife from his own back, and as he was chasing Terry Russell, he fell to the ground and died. At that point, the room was sealed. Officers were called. John Noble told Officer Danny Bauer that this man, pointing to Terry Russell, was involved. And so Terry Russell was taken into custody and questioned about killing Fox Barber.
Like I said, he had pride pressing people, you know, like new people come in, he probably tried to press them before sexual wise. And once, you know, somebody might have got tired and seen the opportunity, he just did it.
He was given his Miranda warning. He was told that a guard and an inmate saw you do this. There was a confidential informant involved in the case, and that they were going to charge him with the murder of Gary Barber. Russell replied that he didn't do it, but Joe Amrine confessed to him.
They've got a hard job to do with people that don't want to cooperate, and it's easy to get overzealous.
Before trial, they questioned Ferguson 30 times, and each time he said he saw nothing, until finally, less than 2 weeks before Joe's trial, they started questioning him, and they told him, look, if you can testify against Joe, that would be very, very valuable to us. And at that point, with that opportunity, Ferguson jumped on it.
Like I said, they questioned me and talked to me for several hours, and then I would say some things, and then they would fill in blanks and stuff like that. And then I gave a written statement, and then after that, they gave a recorded statement. And like I said, they had told me all the things they would do for me if I agreed to.
You know, I told them I didn't really see nothing, you know, from the start, because that was, you know, whatever happened happened behind me, you know. And I told them then that I thought it throwed a glass of water on Barber or something, you know, and Barber chased him around the room. But, you know, I didn't know until a little bit later, you know, a guy was standing by our table and said that he'd stabbed him.
The way that George Brooks conducted the investigation was to get handwritten reports from all of the corrections officers who were involved. And then he compared everybody's statements. And if he saw things that didn't fit, he would change the reports.
I think they changed it a couple times, I think, because they said it didn't match up the other testimony, so they had to go back and change something or another, you know. So I really didn't pay too much attention to what they was changing or anything else. I just done whatever they told me to do.
He would type up finished reports, doctor them up so that all the discrepancies were no longer there, and then return those reports to the officers to sign. And then the original handwritten reports were destroyed. And that's what he testified to at the federal hearing, that that's how he conducts investigations in the prison.
Well, Terry Russell was suspect number one. I mean, because he had just been released hours before from solitary confinement, as had Gary Barber. They had been fighting. So Terry Russell should have been the top suspect by the investigators. In fact, I think he probably was considered that for a little while, but he ended up cooperating with department investigators. In part, he says, to place the blame away from him. He was told by officials that he was going to be identified as the number one suspect, and for good reason.
Randy Ferguson was facing felony charges. There had been a knife found in his cell. He was looking at potentially an additional 10 years as a result of that conviction. In exchange for his testimony against Joe, they promised to dismiss that charge. And they moved him from the penitentiary to the Cole County Jail, just like they had done with Jerry Poe. Ferguson explains that getting away from the sexual predators was the most important thing to him.
Were you having any special problems in the Missouri State Penitentiary in 1985?
Yes, sir. Sorry.
Sure. Can you tell me what those problems were?
I was being forced into homosexual stuff by Clifford Valentine and others.
When you say homosexual stuff, can you describe what they were doing to you?
I was forced to have sex with men, oral sex, and anal sex.
What would happen to you if you refused to cooperate?
I'd get hurt.
And were you ever actually hurt?
Yes. At one time, an officer let another inmate into my cell and closed the door, and he beat me up and then forced himself on me. He had sex with me forcefully. He raped me.
So why did you give false testimony in Joe Amrine's trial?
I don't know, I was just young and it scared me into telling them what they ever wanted to hear.
Jerry was a young white prisoner, somebody who was a target of sexual predators in the housing unit. And in exchange for protective custody in the Cole County Jail, they took him out of prison and put him in the county jail. He agreed to testify against Joe Amrine.
They was telling me that they'd give me a parole and then transfer me out of state and on the interstate compact, and they even gave me a list of the states. There's about, I think about 28 states that had a compact with the state of Missouri. Because there was a couple of states that I wanted to go to, like Oregon, and they didn't have an interstate compact with Missouri, so there wasn't no way I could go to Oregon.
Mm-hmm. And did they tell you that you could pick from this list of states?
He told me to pick out my first choice and then pick other two substitute states.
Okay. Well, let me backtrack a minute and ask you one more question. Was there a tape recorder going at the time this statement was being made?
Yes, sir.
And was that tape recorder then turned off after you made those statements?
Yeah, after they gave this statement, they turned the tape recorder off, and George Brooks asked me if they took me out of the prison to protect me if I would change my story.
Mm-hmm. Why would he ask you if you needed protection, do you know?
Because they knew what was going on with me being forced into homosexuality and all that. They knew what was going on.
Mm-hmm.
They never did nothing to stop it, but they knew.
There are some things we're going to say about the original investigation, that maybe promises were made to those prisoners that they'd be willing to testify.
I do have one thing that you don't have. I have my own memory of the case, and as a prosecutor, when we investigate a case, we don't prosecute a case, much less seek the death penalty, unless we are absolutely sure we've got the right person. You also don't have the background that I have to know the credibility and character of the key investigators in the case like I do. And if you want to tell me they'd set some innocent man up just for the fun of catching somebody so we could prosecute him for the death penalty, you don't know those people like I do. Now, that's not to say we couldn't be wrong. You know, we're human beings like anybody else. But to suggest, as you just did, by those allegations, that somehow there was a conspiracy to frame, convict, and now execute an innocent man, that's absolute nonsense. We could be wrong. But to suggest anything other than that as an explanation for this, such as you just did, is something that I think is sensational journalism and irresponsible. But you can do whatever you want to do.
Did they tell you that they would take any specific action if you did not testify?
Yeah, they said they would charge me with the murder.
Did they say they would do anything else?
Oh, they said they would put me back in the system and then back in the prison, you know, and then I have to deal with it, you know, because they would let everybody know that I was a snitch.
And were you aware at that time of what happens to snitches in the prison?
Yeah, they die or get stabbed or burned up. A lot of things happen, you know.
Were there any threats made to you to induce you to make this statement?
Yeah, they told me if I didn't do what they wanted me to do, then they'd put a jacket on me and throw me out to the dogs, is what they said.
Now, when you say they were going to put a jacket on you, explain what that means.
Put a snitch jacket on me.
One of the most dangerous things that can happen to you in prison is that you can be labeled a snitch. And they were each told that if they didn't cooperate, word would be put out among the prisoners that they had cooperated.
When you gave your testimony against Joe Amrine, did you expect to go back to prison?
No, I didn't. Like I say, you know, the reason I kept saying I didn't know that, and one of the biggest reasons, even after he asked me if I'd changed my story, I said no, because I didn't believe them then that they would protect me. But then when they went into all the trouble that pulled me out to the jail and said they would leave me there, that's when I finally broke down, because I believed them then that they would protect me. They wouldn't take me back.
They had all three of us together, and I was telling them they didn't want to testify, but they pressed it in too. So, and I'm telling them, I'm saying, we know that man ain't do that. We ain't see that man do that. So, all of us, all they wanted was get transferred to another prison for their testimonies. I wanted to tell them then, but in a way, I was scared, you know, about my freedom. That's why I just went along with it.
These weren't some low-level beginning law enforcement officers that investigated this. We brought the best we had into play when we did it. We also have information, have the ability to gain information and intelligence in a correctional setting that is not necessarily admissible at trial, but helps lead us in a direction where to go in the search for the person responsible, not the search for anybody we can pin it on. That is not the way the system works.
When we go in for trial, we depend on an adversarial system of getting to the truth. Prosecution presents forensic evidence. Defense presents independently tested forensic evidence. Prosecution presents witnesses. Defense presents witnesses. Prosecution presents a scenario of the crime. Defense presents a scenario of innocence and an alibi with witnesses to back it up.
Joe was defended by a lawyer named Julian Osman, who is one of the worst lawyers in the state of Missouri when it comes to defending a criminal case. He did no independent investigation. The depositions that he did take, the deposition of Terry Russell, for example, is just barely over 10 pages long. All he did was get him to repeat what was in the original offense report and didn't ask him any questions that had any meaning as far as testing the truthfulness of his testimony.
Prosecution was quite passionate. I mean, in their actions and their, excuse me, they had a good case. I mean, it was presented well. It was all neat and orderly and in line and just, and quite frankly, the defense was very shaky.
To start with, I mean, the public defenders at that time were grossly underfunded. Some individuals had massive caseloads.
The trouble is, where the system is affording counsel, they can't be presenting F. Lee Bailey's or his functional equivalent in today's world for these defendants. It is troublesome. It's troublesome when I look at the turnover rate in the public defender system and the prosecutor system and the low salaries they pay. It is troublesome, no question about it.
The only corrections officer there, a man named John Noble, saw Terry Russell running away from Fox Barber. He heard the commotion, he looked over, he saw Fox Barber chasing Terry Russell. And when the investigation commenced, the very first suspect was Terry Russell, and that was based on Noble's identification.
What are the odds of John Noble mistakenly identifying Terry Russell for me when he didn't know Terry Russell had just been released out the hole for fighting the victim? What are the odds of that? You know?
There were witnesses who were called in the defense who Osman never talked to until they were out in the hall waiting to be put on the stand. And that was the first time he met him. There were witnesses Joe had asked to be called, Kevin Dean Bay being one, who were brought to court, but then Osman never talked to him, never put him on the stand. They just waited out in the hall and possibly by some oversight just never got presented to the jury, which is real significant because Kevin Dean Bay would have told the jury, I saw Terry Russell stab Gary Barber in the back. That kind of testimony was available to Osman had he just done some investigation and talked to the witnesses.
I got so frustrated with it. You know, I mean, I'm in the courtroom, this is a first degree murder, you know, this is the judge up here, I'm scared, I'm halfway scared, you know, here's the judge up here, something but I see what's going on. I said, well, I'm gonna take a chance. I said, Your Honor, he said, Mr. Amran, he said, let me tell you, he said, you have a lawyer there. He said, I don't talk to you. He said, that's what you have a lawyer for. I said, if you got something to say to me, you say it through your lawyer. I said, but Your Honor, he said, I'm gonna tell you one more time, I do not talk to you. Now, if he had just let me say anything, I'd have to tell him, look, Your Honor, my lawyer ain't doing what I want him to do.
If you only got one side, then that poor jury who's asked to play God in all these cases, now go behind closed doors, you're citizens, we're asking you to do something tough now. There's been a terrible crime, and you go behind those closed doors and you decide if this person should live or die.
All of the jurors who we talked to said they never considered for a second the possibility that Terry Russell might have been the one who did it. When we laid that evidence out, a couple of them said, boy, I think we convicted the wrong guy.
I feel myself that I was basically used in this. I feel I'd done what I had to do in the situation and the knowledge that I was given, the information I was given at the trial. But I think the system failed terribly in this case.
Is it just my life that has no meaning, no value to you? Is just people life in general? I mean, are we just stepping stones in your career? You know, I mean, that's what it meant. That's what it looked like to me. He didn't value my life at all. I mean, none at all. I mean, as far as he was concerned, I was just another nigga getting ready to get died.
The only one that I remember was Joe Amrine himself. And I remember his words fairly clearly, well, if you all say I did this, I guess I must have. And he just, asked for leniency, for mercy.
After she had been there, and then after I got convicted, my lawyer tells my mother he felt it was best if she wasn't just going to leave now. Yeah. He told my mama that.
This is the point in time where he's already been found guilty of murder, capital murder. And, all the jury has to think about now is, what do we do with him? Do we sentence him to life or death?
The only witness he put on was Joe. That was it. And he put Joe on the stand to deny that he committed the crime. But Joe basically admitted his prior convictions, and because he wasn't prepared to testify, the prosecutor just kind of had a heyday with him. It was a very poor presentation. Joe's caseworker would have come to court and testified that Joe was a pretty good guy, that he was working on his GED in prison, that he was helping other prisoners.
Bob Faith had been my teacher for probably about 3 years. And he knew me. I mean, I'm around him every day. Figured, what better than get somebody to come and testify on my behalf than a teacher. I mean, he got all the credentials, he got a nice background, And I told my lawyer I wanted him to testify for me, but he didn't do it. He didn't do it.
I thought he was sincere on the stand. I just remember that emotionally, he got kind of emotional, and when you do that, you let your guard down a little bit. And I just thought that for a moment he let the jury see who he was. And that wasn't a bad thing for him. I don't mean that. It's just unusual. Most of these guys maintain a persona that they carry out throughout.
The gurney is wheeled into the death watch cell. The prisoner is made to lie down on the gurney, and he's strapped down. Then they'll wheel him over to the infirmary. When he gets into the execution room, then an IV is started with the saline solution.
You look into the execution chamber, and there's a man strapped to the table, and there's just an IV tube where the lethal injection machine is hooked up to, and the IV line then goes out into the person's arm or to the leg.
I don't know, you know, like I said, I've gotten to the point now where you either try to block it out best as you can, and you just take it. You just got to take it. I mean, you can't get around it. I mean, there's no way you get around it. You can't escape. You can't. Anybody gonna come in here and pull you up out of it? You know, if it looks like the court system ain't gonna give you no action, you know, your appeals are ran its course. There's nothing you can do. I mean, do you want to just lay down and just fall out and start bawling? I mean, that won't get you nowhere. I mean, so the best thing you can do is just try to, you know, tuck it in and keep going. You know? But I mean, it gets hard. Don't get me wrong. You know, I've cried many a nights. I mean, many a nights. But then, you know, here lately, since I'm at this stage of my appeals, I cry. But it's not so much out of pain, but mine's been out of anger. Man, I might get executed, even though I didn't commit this murder, even though I got all the evidence in the world proving my innocence, I still can get executed.
Any party puts a witness on the stand, you're offering up that person's credibility, and it is an issue.
The state relied upon 3 witnesses to build its case. 3 prisoners who said that they saw Joe Amrine kill Mr. Barber. All 3 of those individuals have since recanted their testimony and said that they lied for various reasons.
What I remember, that was the only 3 that gave testimony that pointed him out as being there, and without that, there wasn't anything else.
Why did we rely on them in that case? I don't remember the case, but I presume we had to rely on them. I assume based upon what we believed the truth was, we needed their testimony to make the case.
You said at trial that you saw Joe Amrine and Fox Barber walking back and forth with Joe's arm around Fox's shoulder. Do you remember giving that testimony?
Yes, sir.
Was that true?
No, sir, it wasn't. I wasn't even in the room when that happened, when the killing happened.
Now, you also said that you saw Joe pull a knife from his waistband and stab Fox Barber in the back and take off running.
I lied.
Do you remember that?
Yeah, I remember saying it, but it wasn't true.
You said you saw Barber chase Joe after he pulled the knife out of his back and say, "I'm going to get you, Joe." And then you saw Barber drop the knife. Did you see that?
I didn't see none of that. Once they got me to a bit that I would say that I would testify, they kept telling me, well, how this happened, how this happened, how this happened. I kept having to make up more stuff.
Was any of your testimony at trial implicating Joe Amrine in the murder of Gary Barber true?
Anything that I said implicating Joe Amrine was definitely not true, because I don't know who killed Gary Barber. I wasn't in the room.
He had a change of heart immediately. I mean, he, for 10 months after the crime, said he didn't see it. And then for a 3-week period that included Joe's trial, he said Joe did it, and then he immediately went back to saying, I didn't see anything. He was sent to prison in Colorado, and then eventually ended up in Minnesota, but he wrote letters to President George Bush, President Bill Clinton, to the Attorney General, and so he was persistently writing these letters, and continues to protest Joe's innocence, even though he's been released from prison.
Now, in your statement on October the 21st of '85, You said that you saw an inmate walk up behind Barber and stab him in the back and turn around and run. Did you see that?
No, I didn't see that.
The person who is being chased by Gary Barber, did you know that person? Or did
No.
you get a good look at that person?
I didn't really even see who it was. But as I said, most all these people, I don't even know these people. You know, I never knew these people.
Do you know if it was Joe Amrine or not?
I don't have no idea.
He was sent up to federal prison for making threats against to rape the daughter of a state prosecutor, and obviously that was treated as a very serious matter. You know, Poe went to federal prison on that issue. Inmates can change their stories for a variety of reasons, and being angry and bitter at the state is certainly one of them, and I believe that's probably what happened here.
The fact that a prisoner in the Department of Corrections who's testified against another inmate later changes his story, does that come as a shock to me, having been a prosecutor for 11 or 12 years and having been on the bench for 16 years? No. Look at the world those inmates live in. Imagine the pressure on them to testify to begin with, much less to continue to live with the fact that they testified when they're in a population of other prisoners.
I'm not the prosecutor. I can't promise these guys anything. I can't promise them money. I can't promise them protection. I can't promise them freedom. I have no power over these men whatsoever. And so if they're saying two different things, what I would want to know if I'm dealing with an inmate is what did he have to gain each time he made those statements. And the trial testimony is the only time they were actually paid something of value. And so that's the testimony that you should be really suspicious of.
You know, I feel guilty because a person on death row, for me and two other inmates, you know, they use us to get a conviction, to put a man on death row like I don't know or they don't know who did it. I would like to go back to court on his behalf to vacate my statement because there wasn't no truth to it.
The recantations mean that right now, today, there is nobody who says that Joe committed these crimes. There is no evidence, there's no physical evidence, there is nothing that connects Joe with the murder of Gary Barber.
The fact that they've recanted doesn't per se mean anything to me because I don't know anything about it. You know, there's a process by which an inquiry is made in that regard, and I trust the system. I've been a part of it for a long time. I've watched it work, and I trust that the system will afford an opportunity for that investigation to be made and appropriate conclusions to be drawn therefrom.
The responsibility for a death sentence is spread out among so many different people that nobody has looked at Joe's case from the standpoint that the buck stops here. The first judge to look at the recantations only had Ferguson and Russell. And he said, well, Jerry Poe is still out there, so I don't have to look at these two. The next judge to look at recantations was Judge Guyton. When Jerry Poe was found and his affidavit was presented, he said, well, I don't have to look at Ferguson and Russell because the state judge already did, so I only have to look at Poe. And he's an inmate. Who can believe inmates? So nobody's really taken the job seriously. Nobody has looked at all of the evidence to put it together and ask the question of what happened on October 18th. And when you do that, when you look at all the evidence together, it is very clear that Joe Amrine is innocent.
The Supreme Court's ruled in the past that innocence isn't reason enough to overthrow a guilty verdict. And that's really a sad reality that somehow this process is sacred, but people's lives will get caught up in it, even if you're innocent. As long as the process is followed, then too bad about the results.
Part of our problems with the courts have been technical, procedural restrictions on new evidence. We're saying the courts should consider new evidence as anything the jury didn't hear. If the jury didn't hear it, then it's new evidence. The courts are saying that new evidence is only evidence that could not have been presented earlier during the appeal process by the use of due diligence, which means that if it could have been found earlier, they don't have to look at it.
This was a case that certainly has been back and forth in the courts over the years. It's been more than 15 years now since this murder occurred. I think it shows that there has been a lot of consideration that's been given over the years, and the courts here in the end analysis have found that the conviction and the sentence were justified, and that Joe Amrine should be executed for that murder.
These are probably people who uphold the law and presenting the law, protecting the law. But yet you go over here and you come right back and you're not applying the law, but you're not doing the things that the law tells you that you should do.
The governor is our last hope on this case. He's not under any legal restrictions. He can look at all of the evidence. He can be guided by what the jurors have to say about the case.
He should at least receive a new trial for this. I think he's an innocent man from what I've seen on the, particularly on the post-trial statements and the recantations.
Now, the governor has unfettered discretion. That cannot be said of the courts because there's a rule of law that the courts are bound to adhere to, which helps guarantee us all a fair and equal treatment under the law, as much as one can achieve that goal, of course.
Well, the reason we're asking for a pardon is that Joe didn't do it. There is no evidence connecting him to this crime. Of course, the governor has a broader range of options. He could simply commute the sentence from death to life without parole. But when you're talking about somebody who's completely innocent, that's not justice.
A mistake was made, and I don't feel that Missouri or the governor should be so big as to they can't admit that. Admit the mistake was made, and let's try, to take it even a step further, and actually start the process of correcting that mistake.
Regardless of how you feel about the death penalty, whether you support it or oppose it, this case stands worthy of your consideration. I think it's important to look at this case and see that we're dangerously close to having a human being who is innocent of this charge being executed for this crime.
Talk to the foreman of the jury. Talk to the other jurors. Talk to all of the witnesses in the case. Talk to John Noble. He is the most reliable witness in this case. Everything points to Joe Amrine's innocence. You can't let an innocent person be executed.
A fair analysis of these recantings may be that you can't draw a conclusion one way or the other. It's one possibility.
The system is going to make mistakes. The question is what you can do about it when you find it. And in this case, we have found the mistake. We know what the mistake is, and we know how to fix it. It's just somebody having the guts to step up to the plate and do it.
I thought he deserved a new trial at the very least, because I don't think he'd been convicted if I hadn't lied on him.
The set of facts that were presented at Joe Amrine's original murder trial still are valid, still hold the weight of evidence on their side, and that these developments here, the change stories now, are not going to make a material difference.
The only thing I think of, man, is possibly getting out and getting a job and just leaving it, like going and living, period. Just living, I feel like I've been a picture on the wall for the last 25 years, that ain't moved, ain't nothing happened, just a picture. And my life is not going to pick up until I go back to the streets, And if I don't make it back to the streets, then this will just be this picture here from now on.
I think he'd be very productive. And his brothers and sisters, all of us, we getting ready to point him straight, the straight and narrow way. We're going to be right behind him.
I guarantee you nobody on death row in America today can come forward with this kind of evidence that says he didn't do it. And if we turn our back on this case, then we are disabling the system from stopping the execution of innocent people. And that's why we should all be worried about what's happening here.
Nobody wants to see an innocent man executed, but I trust the process. I trust the appellate process, and I trust the governor will do the right thing. We did our job, we believe, as a prosecution team. Some of the people that were involved in that I know are retired now. Some are working in other capacities in law enforcement. We did our job, and I trust the governor will do what in his best judgment is right here, and I'm comfortable with that, whatever his decision is.
So now we're at a new point in this country. And the new point we're at, 13 states, including my own state of Louisiana, now has initiatives for a moratorium on the death penalty while we take a good, hard look at what's been going on with the death penalty. Because no person, even if in principle they're for the death penalty, wants to see an innocent person executed.
It's too final, too permanent, and there's no way out of it. Once it's administered, that's it. And execution of one innocent person is just, it's abhorrent. It's no more than murder.
We recognize that any murder in our society is immoral to begin with, and the state replicates that action, with great deliberation. It's especially reprehensible, though, and it would be to almost every proponent of the death penalty as well, that the state would and does and has executed innocent people. We had the ability, though, to intervene, and so our state surely ought to.
There's always a risk that we're going to use the death penalty to execute an innocent person. What is even more disturbing is that the death penalty has become so tied up with the political process that people cut corners to get death sentences.
I feel that the people of Missouri should try to, if nothing else, use my case as a stepping stone to try to get at least a moratorium placed in.
All right. This KOMU News.
The makers of a new movie out tonight hope the film saves a Missouri man's life. Unreasonable Doubt, the story of Joe Amrine, is about a man on death row who filmmakers believe was wrongly accused.
I'm at the Ragtag Cafe in downtown Columbia, where the show debuts in about a half hour. Columbia crew who created the film hopes that it reaches more than just the average audience. They'd like it to get to Governor Holden. That's because he has the power to stop Amrine's execution.
Tonight's documentary shows the state's 3 trial witnesses admitting that they lied about seeing Amrine fatally stab Gary Barber in 1985.
Your presence here and your continued action is nothing short of an affirmation of the fundamental value of human dignity. And we don't owe Joe any less than that, please.
March 7th, Thursday at 1:30, we will meet on the Capitol steps in front of the Capitol. And at 2 o'clock, we will go to the governor's office and we will deliver a copy of this to the governor.
To see our brother on death row is it's heartbreaking, and to see all this evidence that says Joe is innocent.
The very arguments that are being made in this documentary are points that were specifically considered by the court.
Everybody has a stake in this. We don't want to execute innocent people.
And in this case, with a documentary film being made, if the filmmakers or the inmates' attorneys submit that to the governor's office, that will certainly be reviewed by the governor's legal team.
The filmmakers plan on delivering that movie to Governor Holden on March 7th. The Missouri Supreme Court has yet to set a date for Amrine's execution.
Well, after Ryan, Dan, and I crafted the documentary with the help of a lot of people, it was amazing how advocates were able to use it as ammunition in the fight to tell Joe's story. There was an incredible synergy of the groups, whereby the groups organized showings all over the place. They organized protests, and they got the attention of the mass media. I mean, quite frankly, I was surprised at how quickly and widely word got out about Joe's case.
I would like to go back to court on his behalf to vacate my statement because there wasn't no truth to it.
Activists used the documentary in conjunction with communication from other people concerned about Amrine's case. Advocates use any and all available means to get the word out.
This is KOMU News at 10.
About 60 people rallied in the steps of the Capitol in Jefferson City today. They say convicted murderer Joe Amron is innocent of killing an inmate at the state prison in Jefferson City.
And they made a movie to try to prove it. KOMU's Evan Onstadt tells us more about their film and why some people think it's the key to saving Amron's life.
About 50 people stood in the shadow of Thomas Jefferson today in support of Joe Amrine, convicted of killing a man in prison in 1985.
And in this case, because the courts have tied their own hands by inventing procedural rules that say we don't have to look at the evidence, that we are now knocking on the governor's door and the buck stops in there on the second floor.
This is unreliable now, or the unreliable then.
Satisfied. The government used this bill to set line free.
Oh, sure. I'll bet you through to Daniel Bell. Just for a moment. It's hot in here.
It's hot.
Here comes the judge.
Hi,
Judge.
I'm Glenn Norton.
My name is John McHale. I'm
Nice to
president
meet
of
you,
the
John.
Graduate Student Association down at MU.
Good to meet you.
And on behalf of the defense team and Joe's family and jurors who were originally at the original trial but believe that the trial should be reconsidered, and we as filmmakers, we would ask that the governor look at the compelling case that we believe is presented in this document and reconsider the Joe
We'll certainly
Amrine
take it into
situation.
account, and we appreciate you delivering it to us, and we'll give it full consideration.
Thank you very much, sir.
Thank you all.
Oh, Judge, will the governor be able to see the videotape as well? Judge? Judge, there's some petitions too.
You can leave those. You can just leave those as Maryland if you want to.
Will the governor see the videotape too?
Whether or not the governor sees the videotape will be based on my review of it, and whether or not I think it's part of what he needs to see or doesn't, and we'll go from there. It's just we're going to handle it like we do every case, review the entire file. And if this is part of what needs to be considered, then certainly he'll have a chance to review it. Whether he watches it or whether I tell him what's on it, that'll be based on my recommendation and on what he wants to see. So, all right.
We encourage him to watch.
I'm sure that you do. That's fine, and we'll take a look at it.
Thank you very much, Judge.
Thank you all. Take care.
Do the right thing, Judge. Thanks a lot, man.
Of course, Holden is not required to watch the movie, but O'Brien says the governor should not just ignore it.
The tape is less than an hour long, and I know the governor is awfully important, but a man's life is worth an hour of his time.
Protesters hope the film persuades Holden to free Amrine. Evan Onstadt, KOMU News, Jefferson City.
I think the campaign went well. We had, various organizations come together.
ACLU, University of Missouri chapter, they had a news conference in the Capitol. It was a good news conference, I think. And again, just another point for the media to kind of be reminded of Joe's case, and for the public to continue to keep it in their awareness as well.
Letters are going to be coming from Cambodia, they're going to be coming from Iran, they're going to be coming from Canada and Mexico and Brazil, all saying the same thing, that justice will be served when Joe Amrine is pardoned.
Does Governor Holden believe, between him and God, that today a reasonable jury would convict Joseph Amrine and sentence him to death?
When they issued the briefing schedule, that was a big development to us, because we knew that we had a substantial portion of the court that wanted to hear this case, because they had never done that before. They had never issued a briefing schedule on a habeas corpus petition filed at the last minute.
Defense counsel Sean O'Brien told the Supreme Court his client deserves a new trial.
If you take the unreliable witnesses out of the case, the inmates, you are left with Officer John Noble, who has stuck by his story since day one. He looked over and he saw Gary Barber chasing Terry Russell and identified Terry Russell as the apparent perpetrator of the homicide.
Their whole basis of the perjured testimony is that the prosecutor should have known that my witnesses are liars.
The state contends the decision handed down by the U.S. Supreme Court in the Herrera case limits the Missouri court's discretion in ordering new trials only to those cases where a defendant's constitutional rights were violated.
Who would put an innocent man to death so long as he received a fair trial?
That's not what they said in Herrera. In Herrera, they said if you find a claim of actual innocence and you don't have a constitutional violation, it's not for the court to intervene. It's for the governor to step forward.
And we must execute them anyway if we can't find an underlying constitutional violation at their trial.
That's a standard, Your Honor.
Every jaw in the courtroom just dropped. It's just like, I can't believe that, you know, a government official just stood in the well of the Missouri Supreme Court and demanded the execution of an innocent person. But that's exactly what happened. And so at that moment, you know, I knew that they couldn't rule against us.
Sean O'Brien says Joe couldn't believe it when he found out today his death sentence had been overturned, and there is still the chance that Joe won't get out of prison. The Cole County prosecutor has 2 months to press charges for a retrial.
Oh, it was wonderful news, you know, and it really gives one a sense of some reason for faith in the system.
I was just overjoyed. I was very happy. Called Joe right away, and Joe just started whooping and hollering and you know, alternately laughing and crying. And the way the court did it was absolutely remarkable. They took the Attorney General's argument head on and said, essentially, we don't care if he had a fair trial. Innocence by itself is a good enough reason for us to give relief. And that was a remarkable decision, and in fact, stands alone in the United States right now.
Leaders will be
that add resistance for.
But
we're not done yet. Call in the next 18 minutes.
At 10.
A few more days and he would have been set free.
Joseph Amrine was 4 days from going free after spending 10 years on death row for first-degree murder. Now he's out of state prison, but not out of jail.
Amrine was rearrested for the murder and transferred to the county in which the prison murder had occurred in 1985. The prosecutor considered retrying Amrine while awaiting the results of a DNA test from blood found on Amrine's pants.
You can read the opinion and see the problems. 23 years of age, 3 witnesses recanting, and it's whether or not those are insurmountable problems. And if they are, you don't have a submissible case. But if you can work through, and we'll be working through the transcripts and the various exhibits, and if there's a way to try it, we'll do it.
After spending many years in the Missouri State Prison, Amrine has now moved to a new location, the Cole County Jail, which is where he will stay until at least August 12th, the date of his next hearing.
A Cole County judge will rule in August whether the case goes to trial.
The DNA test came back, and of course, you know, it was not Gary Barber's DNA on Joe's clothes. So, you know, they have no evidence.
Joe, what's been the hardest part of all this?
You know, it's hard being on death row, just put it like this, you know, it's hard. It can't be described, but it's hard, you know. Not giving up been the hardest part. I went 2 years there with no appeals at all, you know, so, you know, I just knew I was going to get executed, you know. Mr. O'Brien?
The irony of this case is that if the question is there an innocent man sitting on death row, they can't find the blood to test it. And now that they might have to let an innocent man go, suddenly, within days, they find the blood.
What do you want to do first, Joe? Go home. I'm not gonna lie. Go home, meet my family, my nieces, nephews. I got a bunch of them I never met before. I got people that supported me that overseas. I need to call and thank them and stuff like that. You know, got a lot of stuff I need to do. You know, got to try to reinsert myself back in society. You know, it's been a long time, 27 years. I got a hard road to travel.
Mr. Amrine, was there any one event in this time that you've been in jail legally that you missed in your family life that you especially regret missing?
Oh man, I miss so much. I miss my mother's passing, niece. I miss my son growing up. I miss so much. It's just too much. It's just too much to say. I missed a lot. I missed a lot. I can't make up for it either. You know, nothing I can do about it.
After you get back to Kansas City and reacquaint yourself with your family, any long-term goals, job you want to do, or anything like that?
My mind is made up probably to get think about getting some type of therapy help for, you know, because I've been locked up so long. And then once I get rid of that, I'll probably play a role in trying to abolish the death penalty. It took 18 years to win this battle, and I'm hoping we end up winning the war. Oh, I got butterflies all in my stomach. I don't believe it. Can't believe it. Can't believe this.
Outside after all this time.
That could be you. Stay here. About 6 months.
Yeah, I was gonna say.
Oh, you don't know Joel.
You don't know Joel.
Baby daddy.
Come out through here, Joel.
This is the beginning of the ending. No, this is the beginning of the ending. Because it ends that other documentary, and now we on to another thing. We're all on to something else.
I laid down last night about 12:30 to go to bed and never went to sleep. I got too many butterflies in my stomach. Got too many butterflies and too many thoughts. You know, just constant things running through my mind. You know, and just seems so unreal. No, we didn't catch each other. I walked over here.
It's a hologram coming to help you.
Well, actually, I had exhausted all my appeals, had been denied by the United States Supreme Court, and we somehow was allowed to go back into the Missouri Supreme Court because I believe because of the documentary, they wanted to take another look at my situation. I stay with one of my sisters, and I have a job working at my lawyer's law firm. And, you know, I spend a lot of time doing the things which I'm doing now, you know, so.
11,204 Let me see.
Let me see.
I believe it's a swing right now. People are beginning to realize that death, executing people is cruel and unusual punishment, you know. And I think majority of people is coming to realize that now. I've seen a lot of good friends that were mine was executed. I left a lot of good friends at Potosi, you know, and they're in the same predicament that I'm in, and there's really nothing I can do for them other than the things that I'm doing here, speaking out, you know, against the death penalty, you know, trying to show some support, hoping we can get a moratorium or they abolish the death penalty, because they might not be as lucky as I was. I'm being pretty busy, you know, doing this and reestablishing myself with my family. You know, I have a 28-year-old son who was 2 years old when I was incarcerated. You know, I've really been blessed with my family.
He could be a persuasive spokesman to go around and delivering his message. This is what happened to me. But also the other side of the death penalty movement are the people who have been executed who didn't need to be executed.
There are 2 people before Joe who are among the 109 in the U.S. who were found to have been wrongfully convicted and sentenced to die and exonerated.
Several Missouri prisoners have been executed despite questions similar to those in Joe Amrine's case.
Here's Larry Griffin anyway, but that's a great picture of him.
Roy Roberts and Roger Doyle were executed despite compelling cases. There are also many individuals serving life sentences despite strong cases indicating innocence. Dale Helmick is serving a life sentence for killing his mother, despite the fact that he could not have been at the location due to a flooded Missouri River. Dale's defense was arranged by the victim's ex-husband, who could have been a suspect and stood to gain financially.
We had probably the best relationship a mother and a son could have.
Dale's lawyer argued that her death was accidental, despite a concrete block tied around her body.
Dale couldn't have won that case were he Mother Teresa.
Why not?
The fix was in.
Kenny Halsoff, a congressman from Missouri, was the prosecutor in the politically lopsided case. Halsoff has also been accused of cases of prosecutorial misconduct. There are doubtlessly many other Joe Amrines who have fallen through the cracks of our system.
What was amazing to me here is you had a synergy of groups that were able to communicate to each other through a variety of means in order to organize the events that focused media attention on Joe's case. And everybody in America have those same means at their disposal. We used home computers, we used telephones, we used personal contact, and all of those things together made it possible for the people of Missouri to be aware of the injustice in this case.
Government officials behave differently when they know they're being watched. And everybody knew that people were watching this case, that whatever happened on this case was going to be covered in the media, but it was going to be balanced coverage. For once, it was going to be more than the Attorney General's press release.
What advocates were able to do in Joe's case was make it easy for the mass media to cover the story by sending weekly updated press releases, by having a prepared press kit, and having the video itself, which put a human face on Joe's case, which is particularly important in a visual medium.
Setting sound to picture makes the newsreel a movie house fixture until it becomes clear that television is destined to become the new eyes and ears of the world.
citizens, knowing that democracy is action and not just a word, spoke out and demanded justice.
Picture this. People got involved documenting injustice, talking flares, protesting efforts of a few, working television, radio, newspaper news.
That was all right. That was all right.
Pictures of its face. Look at your picture.